All right, folks, we've made it to the grand finale. Last time I took the fight to the HOA, doubling their rent and blocking their parking lot with my tractor and hay bales after they tried to evict me from my 50-acre ranch. Chaos erupted and they were mad, but I wasn't backing down. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jake, your rancher with the wildest story, how the HOA tried to evict me and how I hit back hard. Today we're wrapping it up with a sweet taste of victory. If you missed the earlier parts, go binge them now, smash that like button, and subscribe for the craziest ranch saga on YouTube. Let's finish this ride. The morning after I blocked the HOA's parking lot, I woke up to the sun rising over my 50-acre ranch, painting the hills gold and pink. My horses, Bucky and Star, whinnied in the pasture, and my dog Rusty bounded around, chasing a rabbit through the dew-soaked grass. I sipped coffee on my porch, the steam curling in the cool air, and grinned at the chaos I'd unleashed. Cars were still lined up beyond my tractor and hay barricade, honking faintly, their perfect little community in a tailspin. The HOA thought they could scare me off my land with a bogus eviction notice, but I'd doubled their rent to $1,000 a month and cut off their precious parking lot. I felt like a cowboy who just won a showdown, but I knew they'd come back, swinging. The fallout was fast, folks. My phone buzzed all day. Angry voicemails from HOA members shouting about inconvenience and how dare you. One lady screeched, "I can't get my yoga mats from the shed, Jake." I laughed, leaning against the barn, the smell of hay and leather around me. They'd tried to tow my truck, sent nasty letters, and threatened to kick me off my own ranch, all for their greedy plan to snatch my land for more houses. But my lawyer friend Sarah had my back, confirming the lease and my road were mine. I'd turned the tables and now they were scrambling, cars parked on lawns, residents bickering, their storage shed locked behind my barricade. By day 2, I was feeding the cattle, pitchfork in hand, sweat beading under my hat when I heard tires crunching gravel. A black SUV rolled up. Mr. Carlson, the HOA president, and 2 other board members, all in stiff suits, stepping out like they were in a courtroom drama. I wiped my hands on my jeans, heart thumping, and walked over, Rusty trotting at my heels. Carlson's scowl was gone, replaced by a tight fake smile. "Jake, can we talk?" he said, voice low, hands clasped. I tipped my hat, leaning on my fence, and said, "Sure, Carlson, porch is open, let's hear it." Inside I was buzzing. Were they caving, or was this another trick? We sat on my porch, the old rocking chairs creaking, the hills stretching out behind us. Carlson cleared his throat, the other 2, a stern woman with a clipboard and a guy in glasses, shifting awkwardly. "Jake, this situation has gotten out of hand," Carlson started, glancing at my barricade in the distance. "The rent hiked the roadblock. Our residents are upset, no parking, no storage access. We'd like to negotiate." I sipped my coffee, slow and cool, hiding my grin. Negotiate? A week ago they were trying to evict me from my own home. I leaned forward, boots planted, and said, "You started this, Carlson. Trying to boot me off my ranch? I'm just protecting. What's mine? What's your offer?" The woman with the clipboard piped up, her voice sharp. "We'll pay the $1,000 a month, but you move that tractor and hay. Now, people need to park." I raised an eyebrow, heart racing. They'd blinked. The $500 rent my grandpa said in the 80s was history, and $1,000 would buy new fencing, better feed, maybe a saddle for Star. But I wasn't done. "Not so fast," I said, crossing my arms. "You threatened my home, my horses, my life. Want the eviction nonsense dropped, gone in writing, and an apology on paper for trying to bully me." Carlson's face tightened. The guy in glasses coughed and the woman scribbled furiously. I held my breath. Would they walk? They huddled by their SUV, whispering, gesturing, Carlson's hands flailing. I petted Rusty, his fur warm, and watched the clouds drift over my hills. This ranch was my everything. 5 years of hard work, memories of my grandpa teaching me to ride here, the quiet nights under the stars. No HOA was taking that. Carlson came back, jaw tight, and said, "Fine. Jake, we'll drop the eviction claim, write an apology, and pay the $1,000, just open the road." I stood towering over him and stuck out my hand. "Deal. Get me the papers and the tractor moves." They nodded, shook my hand, and drove off, dust trailing. The next day, a courier dropped off a thick envelope. I tore it open on the porch. Heart pounding, there it was. A letter killing the eviction signed by the board and a typed apology. "We regret any misunderstanding regarding your property and acknowledge your rights as landowner," it read. I whooped, Rusty barking, and waved it like a flag. The new rent, $1,000 a month, started hitting my account. Cha-ching, folks. I grabbed my keys, hopped in my pickup, and drove to the barricade. I fired up the tractor, its rumble shaking the ground, and hauled the hay bales back to the barn, sweat dripping, muscles aching. The road was clear, cars rolled in, and the HOA's parking lot was theirs again, but they knew who was boss. I leaned against my truck, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the pasture. Bucky and Star grazed, tails swishing, and the cattle lowed softly. I'd won, folks. The HOA's sneaky plan to steal my ranch for their expansion, more houses, a pool, their suburban dream, had crumbled. They'd tried to scare me with eviction, but I doubled their rent and blocked their lot, turning their world upside down. Now they'd pay fair, stay off my land, and think twice before messing with me. I walked to the barn, the smell of hay sweet, and felt lighter than I had in weeks. With that extra rent money, I got to work. I bought lumber and built a new fence along the edge of my property, tall, sturdy, painted red to mark my turf. I stood back, hands on my hips, and grinned. Part of it was for the cattle, keeping them from wandering, but part was a message. This is my ranch, HOA, stay out. I splurged a little too, new feed for the horses, a bigger water trough, even a comfy chair for the porch. Life was good again. I'd sit out there at night, stars blazing, crickets chirping, Rusty at my feet, and sip a cold drink, soaking in the peace of my 50 acres. The HOA kept their distance after that. I'd see Carlson's SUV roll by sometimes, but no glares, no letters. Their parking lot hummed. Their shed was back in use, but they knew I held the cards. My lawyer, Sarah, called to check in, laughing when I told her the story. "You're a legend, Jake," she said. "They'll think twice before tangling with a rancher again." I chuckled, picturing their faces when I'd blocked the road. Pure panic. This ranch, my grandpa's legacy, was safe, and I'd fought for it with everything I had. I stood on my porch one evening, the sky a blaze of orange, and took it all in. Hills, horses, the quiet I loved. The HOA's war was over, and I'd come out on top. "We did it, Rusty," I said, scratching his ears. "Folks, that's my story. How the HOA tried to evict me and I doubled their rent and blocked their parking lot. What a ride. What would you have done? Drop a comment. Would you fight like me? Smash that like button if you're Team Rancher and subscribe for more crazy tales from my ranch. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. See you next time for more wild adventures. Yeehaw.
Stop right there, ma'am. The words sliced through the air like a thunderclap, freezing the bustling auditorium in an instant. The chatter of proud parents, the rustle of programs, and the giggles of children in their Sunday best, all of I. It vanished, swallowed by the harsh echo of the security guard's voice. Mary Thompson, a small, unassuming woman in her early 40s, stood rooted to the spot, her heart hammering against her ribcage like a trapped bird. Her worn-out purse, its leather cracked from years of use, dangled from her trembling hands. She dressed in her best outfit, a faded blue dress, slightly frayed at the hem but meticulously ironed, paired with scuffed flats she'd polished the night before. This was no ordinary day. This was the day she'd been dreaming of for 18 long, grueling years, her son Jake's high school graduation. But now 2 towering security guards loomed before her, their faces carved from stone, their eyes cold and unyielding. Mary's breath hitched as she clutched her purse tighter, her knuckles whitening. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes, parents, grandparents, and students, boring into her from the crowded rows of the school auditorium. The air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers from corsages and the faint hum of anticipation for the ceremony. Balloons in the school colors, blue and gold, bobbed against the ceiling, and a banner proclaiming Class of 2025 hung proudly above the stage. This was supposed to be a day of joy, of triumph. Mary had sacrificed everything for this moment. Countless nights working double shifts at the diner, her hands raw from scrubbing dishes, her stomach growling when she skipped meals to save for Jake's school supplies. She'd sewn patches onto his jeans, stayed up late helping with homework by the flicker of a dim lamp, and whispered prayers for his future as she collapsed into bed, exhausted but hopeful. Jake, her only child, was graduating today, bound for college on a full scholarship. This was their victory, a testament to her love and his determination. And now, it was slipping away. "You can't be here," the first guard barked, his voice sharp and final. He was a burly man, his black uniform stretched tight across his broad chest, a walkie-talkie crackling at his hip. His name tag read, Carlson, but his tone held no warmth, no room for negotiation. He pointed a thick finger toward the double. Doors at the back of the room, where sunlight streamed in, mocking her with its brightness. "This event is for ticketed guests only, no exceptions." Mary's heart sank, a cold weight settling in her chest. She opened her purse, her fingers fumbling past a crumpled tissue, a few coins, and the photo of Jake as a toddler she always carried. I don't have a ticket," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper, quivering with desperation. "But this is my son's graduation. His name's Jake Thompson. He's worked so hard, and I just want to see him walk the stage. Please, I've waited so long for this." The second guard, a younger man with a buzz cut and a stern frown, shook. His head, his arms crossed tightly. "No ticket, no entry. Rules are rules, ma'am. We can't let just anyone in. Security protocol." "You need to leave, or we'll have to escort you out." His words landed like a slap, each syllable stinging Mary's pride. She glanced around, her cheeks burning as a well-dressed couple in the nearby seats whispered to each other, their eyes flicking toward her with a mix of pity and judgment. A young girl in a sparkly dress tugged at her mother's sleeve, asking loudly, "Why's that lady in trouble?" Mary's throat tightened, a lump forming as tears pricked the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to let them fall, not here, not in front of everyone. She'd faced hard times before, eviction notices, empty cupboards, the lonely nights after her husband David's death. But this felt different. This was public, raw, a humiliation that cut deeper than any bill collector's call. Mary took a shaky step back, her flats scuffing against the polished floor. "I understand," she murmured, though every fiber of her being screamed against it. "I'll go." Her voice cracked, and she turned toward the doors, her shoulders slumping under the weight of defeat. The guards watched, unmoved, as she moved slowly, each step heavier than the last. She could almost hear Jake's voice in her mind. The way he'd called her that morning. "Mom, you're going to be so proud. I can't wait for you to see me up there." He'd grinned, his dark eyes, so much like his father's, sparkling with excitement as he adjusted his cap in the mirror. Mary had hugged him tight, her heart swelling, promising she'd be in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. Now that promise was crumbling, and the thought of missing his moment, the moment they'd both fought so hard for, twisted like a knife in her gut. She paused at the threshold, one hand on the door, and looked back at the stage. The lights were bright, the rows of chairs filled with eager families snapping photos and waving to their graduates. Somewhere up there, Jake was waiting, his cap and gown pressed and ready, unaware that his mother was being turned away. Mary's mind raced with memories, the nights she'd rocked him to sleep as a baby, singing lullabies through her own exhaustion. The time he'd come home from school crying because kids teased him for his patched backpack, and she told him, "You're stronger than they know, sweetheart." The pride in his voice when he'd told her about the scholarship, saying, "We did it, Mom." This was their day, and now she wouldn't see him cross that stage, wouldn't hear his name called, wouldn't clap until her hands hurt. A single tear escaped, rolling down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, ashamed. The guards stood firm, their shadows stretching across the floor like a barrier. Carlson muttered something into his walkie-talkie, his eyes never leaving her. As if she were a threat, a nobody who didn't belong among the polished families with their printed tickets and bright smiles. Mary's mind spun. She'd heard about the ticket rule months ago, but the school had said parents were guaranteed entry. She'd called the office, explained her situation, no money for extras, a single mom doing her best. But the secretary had been vague, saying, "We'll sort it out." Apparently they hadn't. Maybe they'd forgotten her, just like the world often did. A quiet, simple woman who blended into the background, invisible, until she dared to step into a moment like this. "Please." Mary tried one last time. Turning back to the guards, her voice soft, but pleading. "I don't need a seat. I'll stand in the back. I'll be quiet. I just want to see my boy. He's all I have." Her eyes, wide and glistening, searched their faces for a shred of compassion. The younger guard shifted, his jaw tightening, and for a fleeting second, she thought he might relent. But Carlson cut in, his tone final. "Ma'am, we've got a job to do. Out. Now." The words were a door slamming shut, locking her out of the one moment she'd lived for. Defeated, Mary nodded, her head bowing as she pushed through the doors, the warm June air hitting her face like a cruel reminder of the celebration she'd miss. She leaned against the brick wall outside, her breath ragged, and whispered, "I just wanted to see you shine, Jake." Tears streamed freely now, and she didn't stop them. But little did she know, the universe wasn't done with her yet. A distant sound, boots on pavement steady and strong, grew closer, and 6 unexpected heroes were about to turn this heartbreaking day into something unforgettable. Mary Thompson stood outside the school, the warm June sun beating down on her as she leaned against the rough brick wall, her heart still reeling from the guard's harsh rejection. The auditorium doors had slammed shut behind her, a final, cruel barrier between her and the moment she'd dreamed of for 18 years, her son Jake's high school graduation. The faint sound of applause drifted through the walls, a muffled reminder of the joy she was missing. Her faded blue dress clung to her skin in the heat, and her scuffed flats dug into the gravel as she shifted, trying to steady her trembling legs. Tears stung her eyes, and this time she let them fall, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. She clutched her worn purse, its cracked leather a mirror of her own weathered spirit, and whispered to herself, "I just wanted to see you shine, Jake." But Mary was no stranger to hardship. This moment, painful as it was just another chapter in a life built on sacrifice, love, and a quiet strength that had carried her through the darkest days. Mary's journey as a mother began in hope and ended in struggle. She'd been 22 when she married David Thompson, her high school sweetheart, a kind man with a crooked grin and a dream of serving his country. They'd laughed together, planned a family, and welcomed Jake 2 years later, a squirming, dark-eyed baby who filled their tiny apartment with light. But that light dimmed when David, a Navy SEAL, deployed to Iraq and never came home. Mary was 25, a young widow when the officers knocked on her door, their faces grim as they handed her a folded flag and news of his sacrifice. He died a hero, saving his squad from an ambush, but that didn't ease the ache of raising Jake alone. She'd stood in that cramped living room, Jake toddling at her feet, and vowed to be enough for him. Mother, father, protector, and cheerleader, all in one. Life as a single mom was a relentless grind. Mary moved them into a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, its walls thin and the heat spotty, but it was all she could afford. She took a job at Dolly's Diner, a 24-hour joint with sticky floors and flickering neon signs, working double shifts, mornings flipping pancakes, nights pouring coffee for truckers and drunks. Her hands grew rough from scrubbing dishes, her back ached from standing for hours, and her apron pockets jingled with meager tips that barely covered rent. Some nights, she'd skip dinner, telling Jake she'd already eaten, just so he could have the last slice of bread or the final scoop of mac and cheese. "You're growing, sweetheart," she'd say, ruffling his hair as he ate, her own stomach growling in secret. She'd lie awake on the sagging couch, staring at the ceiling, worrying about bills, electric, water, the looming threat of eviction when payments fell behind. Jake was her reason to keep going. He was a quiet boy, thoughtful and bright, with his father's eyes and a shy smile that melted her heart. Mary poured everything into him. She'd sit at the wobbly kitchen table, a single bulb overhead, helping him with math homework, until her eyes blurred. "You're smart, Jake," she'd tell him, tapping his pencil. "You'll go places I never could." When kids at school teased him for his patched jeans or the second-hand backpack she'd sewn together, she'd kneel by his bed, wiping his tears. "They don't see your strength, baby, but I do. You're a fighter, like your dad." She told him stories of David, how he'd trained as a SEAL, swam through freezing waters, and laughed even in the toughest moments, always saying, "Mary's my rock, Jakey. She's tougher than me." Those stories kept David alive for them both, a guiding light through the long, lonely years. Every sacrifice was for this day, Jake's graduation. He'd worked hard, staying up late to study, earning straight A's despite the chaos of their life. When he'd burst through the door 6 months ago, waving a letter, his face alight, Mary's heart soared. "Mom, I got a full scholarship. College, can you believe it?" They danced around the kitchen, laughing through tears, her arms wrapped tight around her lanky 18-year-old boy. She'd saved for weeks, skipping coffee and cutting coupons to buy him new shoes for the ceremony, black loafers, shiny and perfect under his blue gown. "You'll look so handsome," she'd said that morning, adjusting his cap as he grinned in the mirror of their tiny bathroom. "Mom, you're going to be so proud," he'd replied, hugging her tight. She'd promised to be there, cheering from the front, imagining the moment he'd walk the stage, his name echoing through the auditorium. Jake Thompson, class of 2025. Now, that promise felt shattered. Mary slid down the wall, her dress catching on the brick, and sank to the curb, her head in her hands. The sun blazed overhead, June 2nd, 2025, a day meant for celebration, not heartbreak. She pictured Jake inside, his cap slightly crooked, scanning the crowd for her, his smile fading when he didn't see her face. The thought tore at her. She'd fought so hard, through the sleepless nights, the endless shifts, the times she'd stitched his sneakers together because new ones weren't in the budget. She'd taught him to dream big, to believe in himself, even when the world felt small and cruel. Missing this moment wasn't just a personal loss. It felt like a betrayal of everything she'd built for him, everything David had died for. Her fingers traced the photo in her purse, Jake at 2, chubby-cheeked and grinning, held by David in his uniform. "We did this for you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Mary's strength was quiet, forged in the shadows of struggle. She never complained, never let Jake see her cry, always wearing a smile to keep him steady. When the landlord pounded on the door, she'd distract Jake with a game. When the power went out, she'd light a candle and tell silly stories. She'd taught herself to sew, to budget, to stretch $1 until it snapped, all to give him a chance. Neighbors called her the tough one, the woman who never gave up. But right now she felt anything but tough. The guard's words, "No ticket, no entry," rang in her ears, a cold reminder of her place in a world that often overlooked people like her. She'd called the school weeks ago, explaining she couldn't afford a ticket, her voice shaking as she'd said, "I'm his mom. I just want to be there." They'd promised to sort it out, but clearly they hadn't. Invisible again, she thought, her chest tight. She wiped her tears, her hands rough from years of work, and stood, squaring her shoulders. "I can't give up, she murmured, her resolve flickering like a candle in the wind. Maybe she could peek through a window, hear his name from outside. Anything to be close to this moment. She took a step, her flats crunching on the gravel, and glanced back at the closed doors, the guard's shadows still visible through the glass. The humiliation stung. The stares of the crowd burned in her memory, but her love for Jake burned brighter. She'd find a way somehow to share this day. But then, a sound broke through her thoughts, a low, steady rumble, like thunder on the horizon. Boots on pavement, deliberate and strong, growing closer. Mary turned, her breath catching, her eyes widening. 6 figures approached, their silhouettes sharp against the sun, clad in crisp military uniforms, medals glinting. Navy SEALs. Who were they? Why were they here? Her heart raced, a spark of hope igniting in the darkness of her despair. Little did she know these men were about to turn her heartbreak into a triumph she'd never forget. Mary Thompson stood trembling against the rough brick wall outside the school auditorium, the warm June sun doing little to ease the chill of rejection that gripped her heart. It was 09:55 a.m. on Monday, June 2nd, 2025, and the faint cheers from inside the building taunted her, families celebrating a milestone she'd been barred from witnessing. Her faded blue dress, ironed with care but frayed at the edges, clung to her skin in the heat, and her scuffed flats shifted on the gravel as tears dried on her cheeks. She'd been turned away by 2 stern guards, their words, "No ticket, no entry," still echoing in her mind like a cruel refrain. Her son Jake, her pride and joy, was inside, ready to walk the stage, and she couldn't be there to see him shine. Her worn purse hung heavy in her hands, a symbol of her struggles, and she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Jake." But then a sound cut through her despair, a low rhythmic rumble like a storm brewing on the horizon. Boots on pavement, steady and purposeful, grew louder, closer. Mary's head snapped up, her breath catching, as 6 figures emerged from the glare of the morning sun, their silhouettes sharp and commanding. Navy SEALs, in full dress uniforms, were marching straight toward her. The sight was breathtaking. 6 men, tall and broad-shouldered, moved with the precision of a unit forged in battle. Their navy blue uniforms were crisp, gold buttons gleaming, and ribbons and medals sparkled on their chests, a testament to courage and sacrifice. The leader, a man with piercing blue eyes and a jawline carved from granite, strode forward with an air of quiet authority. His cap sat perfectly atop his close-cropped hair, and his boots shone as they crunched against the gravel. Behind him, the others fanned out slightly, their faces a mix of rugged strength and calm resolve. Men who'd faced danger and emerged unbroken. Mary's heart raced, her mind spinning. Who were they? Why were they here, at a small-town high school graduation on a Monday morning? She wiped her eyes, suddenly self-conscious of her tear-streaked face and faded dress, feeling small and out of place before these towering figures. "Mom, are you Mary Thompson?" The leader's voice was deep, steady, and kind, cutting through the haze of her thoughts. Mary blinked, her hands tightening on her purse as she nodded, too stunned to speak. He stepped closer, his blue eyes softening as he extended a hand. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hayes, U.S. Navy SEALs. These men and I served with your late husband David in Iraq." The words hit Mary like a wave, stealing her breath. David, her David, the love of her life, gone 16 years, had been a SEAL, a hero who'd died saving his team. She'd clung to his memory, telling Jake stories of his father's bravery. But to see these men here now felt like a dream. Her lips parted, a shaky whisper escaping. You knew David." Lieutenant Hayes nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "We did, ma'am. David was our brother, the best of us. He talked about you all the time. His rock, he called you, the woman who kept him going through the toughest missions. He'd show us your picture, brag about his little boy, Jake, and his dreams for you both. Hayes gestured to the men behind him, each standing tall, their eyes reflecting respect. One, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, tipped his cap slightly, his gaze warm. Another, lean and quiet, clutched a small folded flag, a silent tribute. Mary's eyes welled, up again, her hand flying to her mouth as memories flooded back. David's laugh, his gentle touch, the way he'd promised to come home. "He loved you so much," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Hayes's expression turned serious, his voice firm. "We heard what happened, ma'am, how the guards turned you away. We got a call from the school a week ago, asking us to be here for a special tribute to David, to honor his sacrifice as Jake graduates. We came for him, for you, and for the family David left behind." He squared his shoulders, his medals glinting in the sun. "When we arrived and saw you outside, we knew something was wrong. David would never stand for this, and neither will we. You're not missing your son's graduation, not on our watch." Mary's jaw dropped, hope flickering in her chest, like a fragile flame. "But the guards," she stammered, glancing at the closed doors. "They said no ticket, no entry. They wouldn't listen." Lieutenant Hayes's grin was sharp, confident, the kind of look that said he'd faced worse than a pair of security guards and come out on top. "Ma'am, we don't follow rules like that when it comes to family. David was our brother, and that makes you and Jake ours too. We've stormed beaches, defused bombs, and fought in the dark. Getting you into this auditorium is nothing." The SEAL behind him, the one with the scar, chuckled, a deep, gravelly sound. "Yeah, those guards don't know who they're dealing with," he said, cracking his knuckles playfully. Another, a younger man with steady brown eyes, added, "David saved my life once. This is the least we can do." Mary's heart swelled, a mix of awe and gratitude washing over her. These men, strangers yet bound to her by David's legacy, were here to fight for her. Hayes turned, motioning to his team. "Gentlemen, let's move." The SEALs snapped into formation, two on either side of Mary, two behind, their boots hitting the ground in unison. Hayes offered his arm, and Mary hesitated, her hand trembling as she took it, feeling the strength in his grip. "You're with us now, ma'am," he said, his voice a steady anchor. "We'll get you inside, front and center, where you belong." Mary's breath hitched, a shaky smile breaking through her tears. She felt small beside them, her faded dress a stark contrast to their polished uniforms, but their presence lifted her, made her feel seen, valued, for the first time that day. They marched toward the auditorium doors, a force of nature in blue and gold. The gravel crunched beneath their boots, the sound echoing like a drumbeat of purpose. Mary's pulse raced, her mind whirling. Could they really do this? The guards had been so cold, so final. Their rules are rules, a wall she couldn't breach. But these men, David's brothers, moved with a confidence that brooked no argument. As they neared the entrance, the double doors loomed, the glass panels reflecting the morning sun. Through them, Mary glimpsed the guards, still standing like sentinels, their arms crossed, their faces set. Her stomach twisted, fear creeping back. What if they stopped her again? What if the humiliation returned, worse than before? Hayes glanced down at her, his blue eyes steady. "Don't worry, ma'am. We've got this. David's watching and we're not letting him down." His words, firm and sure, steadied her, and she nodded, clutching his arm tighter. The SEALs moved as one, a wall of strength around her, their medals clinking softly, their presence a shield against the world. The burly SEAL with the scar flashed her a grin, whispering, "You're tougher than you think, Mrs. Thompson, just like David said." Another, the quiet one with the flag, gave her a nod, his eyes kind and resolute. Mary's chest tightened. a mix of pride, grief, and hope swirling within her. These men had fought beside David, shared his laughter, his fears. Now, they were here for her, for Jake, turning her darkest moment into something extraordinary. The doors were steps away, and Mary's heart pounded as Hayes led the charge. The guards looked up, their eyes widening at the sight. 6 Navy SEALs, uniforms gleaming, marching with purpose, a fragile woman in their midst. The crowd beyond the glass began to turn, whispers rippling through the auditorium. Mary took a deep breath, her quiet strength flaring to life, fueled by the men beside her. Whatever happened next, she wasn't alone. These heroes, David's brothers, were here to make sure she saw her son shine, and nothing, not even 2 stubborn guards, would stand in their way. The double doors of the high school auditorium loomed before Mary Thompson, their glass panels reflecting the blazing June sun at 09:58 a.m. on Monday, June 2nd, 2025. Her heart pounded like a drum, a mix of fear and fragile hope swirling in her chest. Just minutes ago, 2 stern security guards had cast her out, their cold words, no ticket, no entry, ringing in her ears, shattering her dream of seeing her son Jake graduate. Her faded blue dress, ironed but frayed, trembled in the breeze, and her scuffed flats dug into the gravel as she stood, a small, humble figure dwarfed by the 6 Navy SEALs surrounding her. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hayes, his piercing blue eyes steady and his crisp uniform gleaming with medals, gripped her arm gently, his strength a lifeline. 4 SEALs flanked them, 2 on each side, 2 behind, moving in perfect sync, their boots thumping the ground like a heartbeat of resolve. Mary's breath hitched as Hayes gave her a nod, his voice firm. "You're with us, ma'am. Let's get you inside." With that, the doors swung open, and the SEALs marched forward, escorting her into a moment she'd never forget. The auditorium burst into view, a sea of color and sound. Blue and gold balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and a banner proclaiming Class of 2025 stretched proudly above the stage. Rows of folding chairs held families in bright dresses and pressed suits, their faces alight with excitement, cameras flashing as they waved to graduates in caps and gowns. The air buzzed with chatter, the scent of flowers from corsages mingling with the faint hum of anticipation. But as the SEALs stepped inside, a hush rippled through the crowd, heads turning, eyes widening at the sight. 6 Navy SEALs, their navy blue, uniforms sharp, gold buttons glinting, and chests adorned with ribbons and medals, marched in formation, Mary at their center. Her worn purse dangled from her shaking hands, and she felt the weight of hundreds of stares, parents, students, teachers, all frozen in awe. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Who are they? Look at those uniforms! Who's that woman?" The 2 security guards, Carlson and the younger buzzcut man, stood near the entrance, their arms crossed, their faces set in stern lines. But as the SEALs approached, their confidence faltered. Carlson's jaw dropped, his thick frame shifting uneasily, his walkie-talkie crackling uselessly at his hip. The younger guard's eyes darted between the SEALs, his frown melting into confusion, then something like fear. Mary's stomach twisted, memories of their rejection flashing back. Carlson's barked, "Rules are rules," the way they'd pointed to the door, the humiliation of being watched by the crowd. Her cheeks burned, and she gripped Hayes's arm, tighter, her knuckles white. What if they stopped her again? What if this brave effort failed, and she was turned away in front of everyone? Lieutenant Hayes didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his boots echoing on the polished floor, his presence commanding the room. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but steel-edged, "this is Mary Thompson, widow of Petty Officer David Thompson, a Navy SEAL who gave his life for this country. She's here to see her son graduate, and we're escorting her in." His blue eyes locked onto Carlson, unyielding, daring a challenge. The burly guard stammered, his hand twitching toward his walkie-talkie. "Sir, she doesn't have..." A ticket. This is a secure event and we've got rules. His voice wavered, lacking the bite it had before. The younger guard shifted, his gaze flicking to the SEALs, 6 warriors, battle-hardened, their medals a testament to courage, their unity of force no rulebook could match. Hayes' grin was sharp, almost daring. Rules? Son, we've faced enemy fire, navigated jungles, and jumped from planes at midnight. Your rules don't apply when it comes to honoring family. Mary is our guest of honor, and she's coming in. Any problem with that? His tone was steady, a quiet power that filled the silence. The SEAL to his left, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, crossed his arms, his bulk a silent threat. Another, a lean, quiet SEAL with steady brown eyes, stepped closer, his hand resting on the folded flag he carried, a tribute to David. The crowd watched, breathless, some leaning forward, others murmuring in excitement. A child in a sparkly dress tugged her dad's sleeve, whispering loudly, "Are they superheroes, Daddy?" Mary's heart fluttered, a faint smile tugging at her lips despite her nerves. Carlson's face reddened, his eyes darting between Hayes and the other SEALs. Then to the growing sea of curious faces, the younger guard uncrossed his arms, his shoulders slumping, doubt clouding his features. Sir, we just follow protocol," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Hayes tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. "Protocol's fine, but this is about respect. David Thompson saved lives, including mine. His widow sees this graduation. Step aside." The words hung in the air, final and unshakable. The SEALs stood taller, their formation tight, a wall of strength around Mary. Carlson swallowed hard, exchanged a glance with his partner, and slowly stepped back, the fight draining from him. The younger guard followed, his head dipping as if in surrender. The path was clear. Mary's breath caught, her eyes stinging with tears of relief. Hayes glanced down, his expression softening. "Ready, ma'am. You belong here." She nodded, her voice a whisper. "Thank you. I can't believe this." The SEALs moved forward, guiding her through the aisle, their boots a steady rhythm against the floor. The crowd's whispers turned to gasps, then scattered claps, a wave of awe and curiosity following them. Mary felt small, yet lifted, her faded dress a stark contrast to the SEALs' gleaming uniforms, but their presence made her feel invincible. The burly SEAL with the scar leaned in, his gravelly voice low. "David always said you were the strong one, ma'am. We're just here to back you up." A younger SEAL to her right, his face kind, added, "Your son's gonna love this." They led her to the front row, where a seat had been reserved, a small sign reading, "Honored Guest," taped to the chair. Mary's heart leaped as she scanned the stage, her eyes landing on Jake. There he was, in his blue cap and gown, his dark hair peeking out, his face bright with nerves and excitement. He turned, catching sight of her, and his eyes widened, his mouth forming a silent, "Mom?" A grin broke across his face, pure and joyful, and Mary's tears spilled over, not from shame this time, but from pride. She waved, her hand trembling, and he waved back, his smile growing, a mix of shock and delight lighting up his features. The SEALs took positions around her, 2 standing at attention behind the seat, the others fanning out nearby, their presence a shield and a salute. Hayes helped her sit, his hand steady on her arm. "This is your moment, ma'am," he said softly. "David's here in spirit, and we're here for you both." Mary clutched her purse, the photo of Jake and David inside a quiet comfort, and looked up at the stage. The lights blazed, the graduates lined up, and Jake's gaze kept flicking to her, his pride mirrored in her own. The crowd's murmurs grew, some snapping photos of the SEALs, others clapping spontaneously, the energy electric. A woman nearby in a floral dress leaned over, her eyes bright. "You must be so proud. Who are they?" Mary managed a shaky smile, her voice soft. "They're my husband's brothers, here for us." The humiliation of the guard's rejection faded, replaced by a warmth Mary hadn't felt in years. These SEALs, David's comrades, had turned her lowest moment into a triumph, escorting her not just into the room, but into the heart of the celebration. Her quiet strength, tested by years of struggle, flared bright, bolstered by the heroes around her. As the principal stepped to the podium, the ceremony about to begin, Mary sat taller, her heart full. Jake would walk the stage, and she'd be here, front and center, cheering through tears, surrounded by men who'd fought for her family. The SEALs stood vigilant, their medals glinting, and Mary knew this was more than a graduation. It was a testament to love, sacrifice, and the power of those who show up when it matters most.